say, all those in favor, aye, all those in favor, no. The minutes were approved. This doesn't get you the approval of the minutes.
Okay,
That only gets you the motion.
okay.
All those in favor,
So you're saying,
that just gets you the motion on the table.
okay,
And then you have to actually approve it.
okay. Approve it with two people or all people have to?
Guys are good to
No,
go.
it's a vote. All those in favor say aye. The supervisors go through this ridiculousness. You can't
I
stop.
understand, I understand.
That doesn't do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Ready to go?
You're ready to go.
Okay. This is the Newtown Township EAC meeting, June 7th at the Township building, our first in-person meeting in probably a year plus. I'll start the meeting with a roll call of folks that are here. Sheila,
O'Sullivan Feeney, present.
yeah, sorry. Dane Shoemaker,
Present.
Joe Pinto,
Present.
Harry Bryan,
Present.
okay. And Cindy is supposed to be here, a little delayed, and Janet can't make it. She's got some family issues going on. Let's have a brief moment of silence. Okay. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. The next agenda item is number 6, minutes, and the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, May 3rd. Do I have a motion to approve
So moved.
and a second? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Approved. Next, what I've done is, as always, we have the new business and old business separated. And we're going to move into the new business now, and there's two visuals.
Wow.
What I did is, we've all seen Winding Way and the work that's been done there. And we just have to assume that the developer presented a plan, it was approved, and they went through with that plan when they clear cut that area. What I don't know is the tree loss. There was an abundance of trees along Winding Way, and they were gone one morning. Now,
Bruce, do you know when that photo was taken? Clearly after the Whole Foods building.
no, that's taken beforehand.
Well, but.
Oh, when it was
after-
taken?
After the Whole Foods was there. That's the roof of the Whole Foods. there.
Yeah, that's it. This is Winding Way, and this is Whole Foods right there.
But, so it was sometime between the construction.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well, those trees were there a month and a half ago, I'm pretty sure. Can you put the next slide up? I don't know how well this presents itself, but this is out of the EPG catalog and or press release. I found it in a search. And you can see the orientation is different, but these trees that lined all this road are kind of what upsets me. And I don't see us being in the policing business on these matters, but I think we can make recommendations about how to deal with this situation in the future. Because as I see it, we have a real tree problem in this township right now. I can't leave my street without seeing a big truck taking, 50-year-old trees away. And we can do so much by planting new trees, but we should salvage what's out there already. So this is just a comment on something I saw that maybe the tree commission might want to, take a look at.
But am I right in saying, George or somebody, that the plan would have identified these trees? In other words, one of the issues is, for replacement purposes, somebody inventory what was there before it was gone, and they would have done that.
So there certainly would have been a plan
Right.
for the removal, and there certainly would have been a replanting plan. I don't have that plan in front of me, but I'm sure it's available.
I've seen those plans. So what I haven't seen is an inventory that was done beforehand of the trees that are going to be taken down. Does that happen?
I believe it does. I can't swear to that
I'm
myself.
sorry to keep asking you these things. Cindy, why don't you get a little closer so you were on
I thought we
camera.
were socially distancing. You're
We're on
vice chair.
camera, that's why we're sitting like this.
Problem in part is, though, that the schematic of the build-out that you sent me,
Mm-hmm.
they really couldn't, in a meaningful way, replace that cluster of trees because it's almost all paved.
Well, it's paved now with a sidewalk, and it has been paved, and the trees were about 15 or 20 feet from that paved sidewalk. So that seems like something I should look into, is a pre-construction inventory of the trees on the site. Leonard, you had something to say?
I did. So obviously I reviewed the agenda ahead of time, and I spoke to Bruce to make sure that we were going to have some meaningful information as Leonard Altieri, 611 Tennis Avenue, unofficial liaison to the EAC and frequent visitor. So I spoke to Bruce, I believe it was yesterday, just to make sure that we had some information to make this proactive and productive sort of conversation. So under any normal circumstance, when a land development project takes place, you are correct. There is an inventory that takes place on that property if there's going to be a large amount of trees that are removed. And the reason for that is our Chapter 104, which is referred to as Nature Features and Inventory of our general code, sets up the removal. You remove a tree 24 inches in caliber, you have to replace 2 trees. So every 1 tree of 24-inch caliber, you then have to replace 2 trees that are 2 to 3 inches in caliber. The Ellis Preserve does not fall under the normal general code, and the reason for that is because it's a PRD. So the PRD, again, is to give some autonomy or flexibility with the developers and the township, so they don't have to essentially, go through the normal process. This was a creature of the state legislature that came out after the recession in 2008, and why a lot of these larger developments are operating under that, because it affords them the opportunity to come to the Board of Supervisors as opposed to the zoning hearing board to get a lot of the relief. The one question that the chairman asked is in terms of the inventory. Because there was no inventory taken, I don't have an estimate to give you on how many trees have been removed. But the landscape plan that was filed with the township, the most recent version of that was October 5th of 2020. And this is the landscape plan that they are required to abide by unless the Board of Supervisors were to change it again, which I can tell you it's not going to change, because we are just as annoyed at this as anyone else is. And I'll go a little bit more into that. But they have, under the code, they are required to replace 255 shade trees, 45 evergreen trees, and 661 shrubs. BPG or Equus, in addition to those requirements, is planting an additional 118 shade trees, an additional 253 evergreen trees, and an additional 2,326 shrubs on top of that, on top of those previously existed numbers. Like anything, there's no timeline in terms of when these plantings will take place. My hope is that we can get these in for the fall planting season. There, and the other question I get a lot from residents is, was it necessary for them to remove all of those trees? And so I talked to our township engineer. I talked to a township engineer, two other township engineers that my firm represents in terms of municipalities that are well respected here in Delaware County. And all of them, giving the magnitude of this project, kind of had the same sort of response. Is that yes, it looks like it's, and I am by no way, shape, or form carrying the water for BPG. And I think I've made clear that I am not an overly excited fan of a lot of their antics and this plan in general. But removal of trees is a lot more expensive than the actual saving of the trees. There is massive grading that is going on this project right now. And so that's one of the reasons why a lot of those trees had to come down. They are in the process of grading it now, and they're doing the pad sites. The hope is, and it's all weather permitting, that they can continue to move forward. They're ahead of schedule because they had some good weather to continue to put the pad sites in, finish the grading, and then start, doing the plantings for the fall. So they are moving forward to that. This is something that Steve says to them. I believe it's every 2 weeks that he meets with them. The Board of Supervisors, for anyone who's been logging into the meetings, knows that this is something that we are taking extremely serious and want to have that, done as soon as possible. So I don't want to hijack your meeting. You know me, I'll keep talking.
Appreciate it, though.
Yeah.
Leonard, want to clarify those numbers. You said BPG is responsible for planting 5 shade trees. How many evergreens? 45?
45 evergreens.
And
six-
661 shrubs.
Yes.
And then they're going beyond that.
So they're taking that. So they're taking those. So they're planting 255 shade trees plus an additional 118 more.
Yep.
They're planting 45 evergreen trees plus an additional 253. And they're planting 661 shrubs plus an additional 2,326.
Okay, so my question is this. Because they're a PRD, they are exempt from the requirements. They kind of get more latitude and they're not required to provide the inventory. But they have agreed, or you said they were required. I want to understand required how.
That's a great question.
By who?
Yeah, and I should have fleshed that out. So the PRD is operating off of the design manual. So at the same time that they
What design manual?
the design manual that was adopted as part of the PRD. So when
By
you have
the
a
township or the state?
by the township and BPG. So when you have a development that moves forward with under a PRD, you don't have your traditional, here's the plan, let's go to zoning, let's go to planning, essentially. You have, at the same time that they are mapping out this plan, they're building this in the plan, they're running concurrently a design manual. Design manual covers everything from what sort of benches they're going to be using, what types of lights, features they're going to be having, as well as landscaping. So the landscape plan is part of their submitted land development plans, but also the design manual. The design manual is another requirement that they created in conjunction with the Board of Supervisors adopting this 15 years ago. That's what requires them to do it. The design manual says you are required.
It was mutually decided upon between BPG
And that was all at the public meeting. I mean, I was in high school at the time that was being done, but it was all at the public meetings, like any other plan. They come before the Board of Supervisors, and it's a different version until it gets finally adopted.
And what year was that?
The final plan would have been adopted 15 years ago, give or take, Cindy. So
Yeah, so it's a long lead time. So to me, it's kind of like the developers get to write their own rules, subject to approval by the Board of Supervisors, but they get to kind of write their own rules. So if this is the innate provisions of a PRD, and we have PRD provisions in the code, it sounds like if there were to be another developer that came through and wanted to put another development in under the PRD, then they would write their own, they'd just come up with their own design manual.
yes and no. So each PRD is separate and independent from each development. So the PRD for BPG and the design manual is completely separate from, let's say they want to, I'm just going to use this as an example, Marville. If Marville was to come in today under a PRD, it's it goes through, it starts all over again. It starts completely from the beginning and it moves through that process. And the PRD, again, is a creature of the state legislature. When the recession happened in 2008, they wanted to incentivize developers to have more flexibility in their approval process, as well as giving them longer time frames, so that if they are trying to get financially stable again from that recession, that it would be incentive, appeasing to them, if you will.
Okay, what guidelines are there on the species of trees? And would the Shade Tree Advisory Commission have any oversight on making sure that they're native or what variety of trees?
So again, I don't have that information. I was just on the cursory conversation that Bruce and I had. I wanted to make sure that we at least had some framework of it. What I can do is I can reach out tomorrow and see whether the Shade Tree Commission would in fact have any oversight on that. I will tell you, standing here today, my gut reaction would say the plan's already submitted and approved. So I don't know if the Shade Tree Commission would have much authority over it. But as with anything else, we can always ask them to send a review letter and see whether the EPG is open to it. Again, for all the faults that I think there are between BPG and in my opinion, they have been willing in terms of the landscape to work a little bit with the township. And so that might be an area where the Shade Tree Commission can come in. But again, because these have been approved, I don't know, essentially it's like an ex post facto. I don't know how much leeway the Shade Tree Commission is going to have with them.
Okay, this is all very helpful and I appreciate this, but what is the mechanism for getting that list of trees and getting it to the Shade Tree?
So the landscape plan that I have, and I can circulate it, I only have one copy and I'm going to want it back because it's the only one that I have forever to print. That document, Cindy, I will give to you, has the botanical name as well as the common name of the trees for the deciduous trees, the evergreen trees, perennials, and ground covers. You're going to need a magnifying glass, but they're on here.
Great, thank you.
I do have a couple questions. So you're saying that they are committing to 373 shade trees. This is just putting the two numbers together. 298 evergreens and 2,987 shrubs. So is there any specifications about nursery grade quality for the plant species and the shrubs? Has that been determined, or is that even in the landscape plan?
I know that the landscape plan specifies the heights of them.
And what were their heights?
Well,
Just what I'm saying, so they
this is
don't.
going to be something I'm going to give you.
Oh, no worries.
Under the
I'd like just to
deciduous
see that.
trees, under the deciduous, I mean, there's, I'm not going to stand here and read all this.
Yeah,
There's-
no worries.
that's gonna be
So there is
submitted.
some, at least we're talking 3 to 4 feet back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing for the evergreen trees, everyone in the evergreen trees is 8 to 10 feet.
Awesome.
For the shrubs, these are, 18 to 24 inches, 24 to 30 inches, so on and so
Good.
forth.
And so now, is there anything in there for a replacement value for, let's say, 1 year after they're installed, and a 3-year and a 5-year provision?
Yeah, so there's a general note on here, and it states, if I can find it again, that they are responsible for all planting shall be permanently maintained. So if a tree was to die and the township notices it, they're required under the plan that was submitted and approved to replace that tree.
So do they have to replace their suggested, the new number, or what's the minimum requirement?
Say that one more time.
Will it be, are they only having to replace the minimum requirement, which they, the 255, the 45, and the 61, or what they agreed to in addition to that, to bring to the total number?
The total number is what they're bound by now.
Okay.
They are not bound by what was required under the design manual. They are now, since this has been approved, required and bound by that,
Right.
300 number. And
That would be great for us just to communicate with residents, because just having those numbers might really kind of make you realize that for me to know that there's 298 evergreen trees going in there and they have a minimum of 8 to 10 feet is really, a comforting thing, especially seeing I saw those trees come down. I thought the timing was suspicious, especially because the Shade Tree Commission had just was enacted and it was within hours or days, I could tell you, when I saw the claws coming down. So it was definitely not, something pretty to see or enjoy, but I think if we let them know that, EAC's been spoken about at the shade trees, on top of the supervisors are doing all these things. I think it would be really helpful to the community, whether that information be shared.
Yeah,
especially-
and I'll be honest with you, I mean, that's where I have it, and I said this to the chairman, where I have the internal struggle. Do I
Yeah.
want to do BPG's PR work, or then being a multi-billion-dollar company, I think should be honestly providing that information to their
I
residents.
think BPG has lost a lot of goodwill in this community, and I think BPG is their name. They have a public relations issue that they need to address. So I think if we just give the recommendation from an EAC perspective, that the EAC is not happy with BPG, and we would hope that they would do something to provide a positive environmental presence in Newtown Square. And if we kind of just let them know that's our thoughts, it would be helpful, I believe.
Yeah, I've been surprised at the number of people who have spontaneously told me something that I have thought of myself, which is they are sickened when they
Yep.
drive by there. And people have told me they deliberately change their route so they don't have to drive by there because it's so disturbing to see what has happened there.
I was concerned with the number of people from out of Newtown Square who have said the same thing to me. This weekend, we saw 4 different couples from outside of Newtown Square, and they said exactly that. What did you do to your town? Why is this happening? And it's kind of scary. So I think it's obviously the supervisors, and like you said, this is the PRD development. It's without the hands, but as long as we are communicating, and the supervisors are definitely been supportive of this, just that we let the general public know that something is coming. It will be in the fall, and hopefully, we will see green again.
Yeah, to take this conversation in a little bit of a different direction, and I have to say, I haven't looked at the plan recently, but what's been on my mind a lot lately is the parking spot requirements that are part of our township's code. And have we adapted it to reflect the new reality of people working remotely, people shopping less? And to just give a little background, when I drive down Campus Boulevard through the corporate park, I see huge empty parking lots that were rather empty before COVID, totally empty during COVID. And I suspect that the occupancy level of those buildings will never reach what was originally projected. And why have all that paved surface? And 2 thoughts are, I am exploring and have reached out to a number of sources, the concept of de-paving, trying to reduce the sizes of those existing parking lots as part of the township's MS4 plan, because they get the most value for when impervious surface is removed. So there's that thought. And then the thought of, since these plans were developed 15 years ago, under old models, old formulas, should we relook at the size of the parking spaces? And I know you said it was approved 15 years ago, but is there any mechanism for revisiting that and looking at the parking spaces and saying, do we really need this much?
Yeah, so for the first question in regards to the reduction of the existing impervious surface, whether in the township or under these plans, I can say that there has not been any conversation with regard to that. That conversation would have taken place probably during the pandemic. And it might, and I'm not on the steering committee for this, but it might be reflected in the zoning rewrite, which would then have an effect on the Saldo plan that's at the back of the zoning ordinance. So there's a potential that something might be in there, Cindy. Again, full disclosure to you and to everyone else on this commission, I'm not a member of that steering committee, and it's such a fluid process that I refuse to sit down and read 400 pages that's potentially going to change since they do so many revisions every time they meet. In terms of this plan, I should also note, though, that while the plans themselves were approved 15 years ago, when they apply for their permits, the stormwater management best practices are the most current and up-to-date ones. So it's the same thing with, let's use Marville, for example. If Claude DiPaton was to come in here today and say that he still had valid permits, he would not be able to build the way that he was approved back in the 1980s, because the permit process for the stormwater and for E&S controls and others have been updated, And so when the township issues a permit, we don't issue a permit retroactive to 20 years ago. We issue the permit based off of what the standards are today. And that's not just here in Newtown Township, but that's across the Commonwealth, the way that the municipalities would work. So the overall concept of this BPG development was approved 15 years ago. But the intricate details, if you will, of the stormwater, of the, even the sewer, like they evolve up until the point that the permit is issued.
Thank you.
Yep. And I will, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, just give this and the members of the commission can review it. Like I said, it's 4 pages. It's a landscape plan that was submitted, most recently updated on October 5th of 2020. I just asked that.
All right. Are there other points that need to be made about this subject? All right, we'll move on to the new business, or continue a new business and talk about EAC having a Facebook presence.
So this was an initiative that Chairman and I discussed a few weeks back, but this is an effort to increase the communication as well as the activities that the EAC is engaged in, right? So this would be a Facebook page. This is something that we can operate. It's not a group where members of the community are commenting in, right? It's more of we can engage with the community ourselves, posting information, and get the pulse on the community on different things like that. Comment on maybe the topic that we just discussed in the last bullet point there, and also maintain a calendar of events of things happening, right? So we lost. Well, the springtime, we had a lot of activities going on, but we can kind of gear up for the fall and make sure that we're really promoting. I have a marketing and sales background, so I'm happy to. My intention is to manage this for the group, but look for input and on content and messaging and things like that. Council, we can also cross promote events and initiatives and programs from other groups like Newtown Square and Bloom. Everything that's going on in the greater green community, right? So, target would be to post 3 to 4 times a month, and then I'd love to see a target of 1,000 people by the end of the year. So that would
be fantastic.
Look for support from this group. Leonard, I know you have a large following on
Yes,
Facebook.
4,500 fans.
Yeah, so so that would be the goal. And so any questions or any comment, feedback? I went ahead and built the page already.
Yeah.
So if there's
Flip to the next.
Yeah.
if there's concern about that,
Yeah.
I just took a screenshot of that for the purpose of this meeting. But
I have a couple questions, only because I know, and I dealt with Kathy Sparr from Newtown Township when she was in dealing with the township and putting information out. And I know the township was very careful about putting information out, and even if people made comments, the township's policy was that she was not like to answer back if somebody put up a comment, because it was not a winning situation. You allow the person to make their comment, but you're not going to be able to change minds or change opinions. You just have to let the opinion sit where it is. So with our vision, I guess I greatly appreciate this, because this is awesome. I know we, want to be able to get information content. Every time we do anything, we usually have to go through the township already. And my guess is just, because it's information, it's data that's going out and it's under the township's name, is there going to be some type of process where we're going to have it approved, just so that way we have content that's going out that's, important for the community, but also not biased? Yeah. And so that there's 2 people, and also the township themselves, Steve Neese, the township manager, should be able to approve in case there's anything that we might be saying that's either not appropriate or outside of our bounds, or, I thought that would be helpful as well. And as long as we're kind of providing an educational opportunity, making people aware, I think it's great. It just is, we have to find out what is our focus here, what's our intention, and how are we going to police ourselves, because I know how strict the township is with its Facebook. So just as long as, and do we have even the authority to set up this thing?
It sounds like you're proposing that we set up a process where our posts are reviewed by Steve or someone.
Just so, right.
Just so we.
Because I know he has a tight ship on his information, and I think too, because we are acting in behalf of the township, and I think we might be creating or maybe sending out information that he's gonna have to take ownership of if there's a negative consequence. So I just wanna make sure that we're kind of working together
Sure.
and not creating landmines for him is my only thoughts.
Mhm.
I don't think you have to put anything on that's kind of skewed in any one shape or form as far as an opinion. You're really just trying to spark people's interest in volunteering and stuff like that.
Right. But you could put out like information about just like the trees today. If you put that information out, that would be a very contentious issue. And if we didn't give some context to it or kind of frame it, it could be taken out of context, I believe.
We should let Leonard know because he's going to get bombarded when we.
Yeah, and that's another question. Who will?
And factual accuracy. So,
Yeah.
no, I think you raise a good point, which is if your goal is 3 to 4 posts a month, you could develop an editorial calendar where you maybe know in advance of what topics, and I think there would be different types of posts. You'd have event promotion, in which case you might want to have more than 3 or 4 a month. You might want to have like 3 different blurbs about one topic just because you want to refresh it. I think you get more viewers when you refresh things.
Yep.
But then if there's something informative of maybe, the number of trees that have been planted there, or the fact that this was approved 15 years ago, or if you're talking, I'm thinking about like the Greer Park plan.
Yes.
Like when there was a letter available, or when a plan that you could say the plan is now on the website, you can go look at it, or there will be a meeting if you want to come express your opinion, or maybe there's a survey at the pop-up garden, make sure you do the QR code. I think there'd be a lot of information about that you could post. And when you talk about the approval process, that reminds me that probably about 2 years ago, I remember you shared that Suzanne Walnanen had specifically reached out with this whole issue that anything that went out from the EAC, whether it was a press release or something like that, she wanted to make sure that the township reviewed it before it went out.
Right.
So this would just be, to me, this would fall under that umbrella.
And I guess too, the question is, if someone makes a comment, at what stage do we, tread lightly in terms of the answer? Because let's say if I am seeing that, I believe then you're a governing body and I might make comments to you. So it just is very careful of, and I've seen like Leonard, and how with Greer Park, you were able to answer things wonderfully, but you could see how you could quickly get bogged down with details.
Yeah. Well, that raises another question is, I'm not a Facebook expert, but it seems to me that there are certain Facebook pages where you can't make a comment.
You just turn off the comments.
It's only outbound information.
Right.
But so are we proposing that this would accept comments?
The only issue with that though is, sorry to interject, the only issue with doing that if it's essentially be a government page.
Yes.
So you're creating a public forum.
Right.
There's case law out there, federal case law and state case law that states that when a municipality or a government body does that, you have to, you created that public forum, you can't block people, you can't delete them, I'm sorry.
I think it's gotta be no comment.
Me too.
Otherwise, you're just creating a mud wrestling pit.
But I don't think that you can, under the case law, Harry, I don't think that you can prohibit the comments now.
Even if you
Well,
prohibit
there's a
all
different type
comments,
of
if you don't
Facebook
have
page,
any
which is
comments?
Just an announcement. I don't know Facebook. I don't own Facebook. I never touched the thing, but I do think there is one where it's just an institutional page, but it's not possible. The way you set it up, it's not that you're denying comments. It was never conceived it was possible in the first place. I don't know. I think if you're going to have comments, we're going to wish we had none.
Yes.
The other option,
But how is the township Facebook page, which I think I've been on once or
They allow
twice,
comments.
if they do allow comments?
The other option would be to engage, remember, township Facebook page and maybe just coordinate with them a little bit better. Hey, and just not even have our own.
Well,
Can we attach ours to theirs
Yes,
link
you
that
could
says,
share you can share content with them, and what we do is in Parks and Rec, we do the same thing. We send everything to Nick, and there was supposed to be a communication director handled, and right, understand it. That
Yeah.
position is in the process of being looked at. That person would be handling social media and all the other things, and I desperately would love that, because with Parks and Rec, we're always sending out content, events and things of that nature. But I guess that's what, can we work through them? Because then it's the township that has the authority, but it is great to have an environmentally focused page as well. Yes, and also you can then use PHS content, you can use a lot of other content you can share out. But what's also interesting is then you can actually pay to promote your page, and you can, you bump it up for, this will guarantee that it goes out to so many people. So it is definitely something we should consider. It just is, as long as we accept the fact that we are under the government guidelines.
let me ask a
And I think
Facebook
we need-
question.
I
real quick.
think we need to consider what Leonard said. If there's case law out there where we have to, and the township now accepts comments of all types.
Yeah, I mean, ever since, do you need me to stand over there?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, ever since the township created the Facebook page, they've always allowed the comments because the case law, I mean, we were pretty slow behind the ball when the township established their Facebook page. But there is, the case law is out there. And, I personally don't have a problem with this at all. I think this is a great idea. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest things I've been doing is trying to improve communication. I think that, and we have we had started the process for director of communications. We didn't get the candidates that we wanted. And so that process is starting over again. So I would hope that we can still have an EAC page separate and independent, separate from that of the township. And the person who's the new director of communications can manage both of them.
Yes.
But I think this is something that's worth to bring up to the rest of the supervisors and see how they feel about it, because if we can jumpstart that and start having, start collecting the page likes and the viewership, I think that's important. And then we just kind of transfer the administration duties over to whoever the director of communications will be.
And you do have 1,000 likes for the Newtown Township. So you could invite all of those people to the EAC, and you can actually transfer that data and harvest it and then do your invites for the EAC. And that would be helpful. It would actually be better to get Leonard's invites because he has more people. But that data is available for a fee. No, I'm joking. But the question, I believe, is the township allows the comments, but the township does not answer them back. It's only because, like you said, it's a difficult situation. So would we want to kind of engage? Let's say if you put up that, we want trees, and I come back and say, I don't want trees. So are you going to engage in that dialogue with me, or?
I would. Yeah, I don't-
Right, right.
Yeah.
No.
See, that's the same thing with
I
rear
think
parking.
we emulate,
What Leonard answers a lot.
emulate the township's
Yeah.
Facebook page. Did you have a question? Did your question get answered?
Yeah, and I'm like a weekend using Facebook. So when you say post, that's a posting to your web page, to your Facebook page?
Yeah, and to whoever's following.
Okay, that was my second question. It goes to followers, and to followers only?
Yeah, it's public, so anyone that happens to
Yeah.
stumble upon it.
Because there's two gigantic groups, Newtown Square Community, and
Now,
there's
there's 5 of
another.
them: Newtown Square Community, Newtown Square Community Network, Marple Newtown Square Community, and Town Watch. And then the other one is, if you were originally from Newtown Square. They're like the big ones.
Okay,
And those are groups where people are just, the purpose of those is more commenting and discussion. This is more, I would say, it's
Announcements,
one way
yeah.
of
Right.
sort of communication.
Leonard, I have a question. You said that the township allows posting to the webpage. Who owns responsibility for responding to those public posts?
So we don't respond to any of them. The township has taken a policy of, we post the information out there, and if individuals want to comment with, hey, Leonard Altieri, go to hell, or Leonard Altieri, you're the best, they don't answer either of them. Probably because we receive more of the former than the latter.
And it's so humble.
And that is sort of that seems to be sort of consistent with what a lot of government entities do now. Delaware County Council, for instance, they will respond to some of them, but some of them are asking legitimate questions. Others are just, kind of off the wall comments. So the township kind of has a hard and fast rule that they don't respond to them. And that's not the issue at all. It's just because you still provide the resident the opportunity to
Sure,
to
I
voice their
understand.
feelings.
One thing to note, though, is from a township perspective, it's everyone that has expressed interest in the township. If we're going to have a specific environmental group, those individuals then have to choose to be interested in the environment. And that's a little bit of an area that's a concern, because I really want to reach the people who don't care about the environment, because those who care about the environment would do the right things. So from an educational standpoint, we really want to make those individuals who need to be informed of those things. So that's something to consider.
Well, maybe that's the point where when you come up with these posts, maybe some of them you also ask the township to put on their Facebook page, so it appears on both. So you're hitting a different
Share it in different groups.
I don't think that there's any harm in starting it now. And when we get the director of communications, that person jumps over. Now, again, I'm one of 5, so that doesn't mean I gave the green light to publish that today. I do think that the supervisors should look at it, and just in case there's any other case law out there that I'm not familiar with, that we need to designate that this is an official page versus not an official page, so on and so forth. But I know the basic is you can't block anyone, you can't shut off the comments.
Can you delete an inappropriate, like a real inappropriate comment?
So that's interesting. I don't have an answer to you on that. I would think that it would be a no, because what's profanity to you might be acceptable to me, right? And so that's, it's the famous line from the Supreme Court, I'll know pornography when I know it, right? When it comes to the First Amendment, I think it was Justice Blackburn said that. So it's better to just keep it off, hands off.
Other comments? I appreciate the work.
Well, we appreciate your efforts on it.
Yeah.
We don't mean to be, we're just behind the curve.
This is why we discuss it, yeah.
Well, if we're doing the Facebook, we should also look to do the Instagram and the other social media opportunity, set them up at the same time. Then do you think we should put this together and just present the information to the supervisors just to let them know and let them approve? Because I mean, it's a great idea if once the communication director is hired.
I think it'd be a good idea. I don't think we should take the communications person. Is it near term, bringing that person in? No.
I would say that process is probably going to start again.
Leonard, is that person going to be part-time?
No,
It would be a full-time position?
it would be a full-time position.
So we'll move forward with what we have, and we're glad to present it to the supervisors, and we can, work out the kinks between now and then take their input and work out any further kinks in the whole process.
And in the meantime, any information can be sent to Nick Schlegel at the township, and he's been very good with sharing information out.
Okay, yeah. Do you think the listserv, the communication, does the text messages and the emails, that's something that we can promote that way to residents, or?
The township could also promote itself to get up, increase their
Before we
numbers.
do anything, we'll run it by the supervisor.
Right.
Yeah.
What I usually do for Parks and Rec, I send Nick a content on Friday morning. He sends it out Friday afternoon on the township. And then what I do is send it out to all the other community pages for like Parks and Rec, if we're having a concert and things of that nature. But
Like the pop-up bar, and I get a text message, hey, we're, Saturday.
yeah,
It's like that's.
But Sheila, you're doing this under your name when you send it out, right?
yes, because Nick doesn't have the time to be, sending it all out to the other things, but I give him the content, he creates it onto the Newtown Township, and then I share it all. Eventually, when the communications director is hired, they should be doing all of this.
Yeah.
And then after I send it out at a time, I send it to Leonard and use his fans. So we keep it channeled through a couple times.
Yeah. I think one of the objectives, and what made me think about this, is I do see comments in Facebook now. I'd like to, it's just a great vehicle for communication. We've got 30 people in our database, and there's thousands out there. but I was reluctant to send anything out under my name. I'd just rather keep that, my stuff. And I
Right.
prefer it to come out of this initiative or the township.
Right. I think once the communications person is hired, that's my goal, because I've been doing a lot of free labor for the township. And so is Leonard. That's why they haven't hired the person, I think.
That person needs to fix it.
Any other comments on that? Because we're going to move on if not. Okay, the next item is the business outreach. Dana and I were talking about what we can do in the community to advance the cause. And the fact is, when we begin to talk about sustainable Pennsylvania, one of the items is that, in fact, going to the businesses and promoting sustainability action. So Dane put some meat around our discussion, and
Yeah, so thank you. I have one copy that I printed out.
Oh,
Pass it
yeah.
around.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Can you zoom that up,
Yeah, it's okay.
enlarge that, so we can read it on the
I would have printed out multiple
Oh,
copies,
that's
but I
nice
wasn't
to do
agreeing.
I hate to do
screen? There you
that.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Perfect.
one of the line items, or one of the, is it 18 lines that we have designated as
Mhm.
specific bullet points is serving the community in a economic fashion. So this would be a green business certification that businesses operating in Newtown Township could go towards, right? So the goal would be to promote environmentalism and sustainability within Newtown Township's local business community. It's a free program, to educate businesses on environmentally sustainable practices, as well as reward and recognize those companies that have taken steps to be good stewards. It's a good opportunity, as the economy, I think, is kind of starting to gear back up a little bit from COVID. A good way for the township to engage business owners. In terms of benefits to the township, it helps meet our goals for sustainable Pennsylvania. Again, it's an opportunity to engage the business community, build community around green initiatives, and also reward recognized businesses in that light. And then benefits to the business, right? It's we could do a directory on the website that shows lists of businesses that have committed to specific environmental goals, a window decal they could display on their business, recognition in township communications, right, website. We could do promotional type work. Again, I have some more background with production and photography and things like that we can work with these businesses, help promote them. And then, probably more in depth would be, are there tax or economic incentives that offer businesses if they commit to specific environmental levels, right? For the residents, it's good for business. People want to buy local. They want to support companies that align with their values. There's more data that we could look into for that as well. But I think generally people care about the environment and business that support it. So in terms of how a business would go about doing this, there could be an initial survey that they fill out online. There's a questionnaire that they fill out, right? And actually, Bruce and I put together the questions that we thought would be a good starting point. A lot of this we took from, just online research, looking at other townships and a lot of cities across the U.S. have a program similar to this. They fill out the survey. In terms of streamlining some of this stuff, the basic level, the associate level, right? We call it. It's all automated. They fill out the survey. Someone approves it and then mails them an email. The second level, we'll call it a champion. They meet a higher level of activity and requirements. We can go through that and all this stuff in between, right? And then there's a site visit for the champion level, right? So the BAC, maybe supporting supervisor. I'll go through that a little bit, but they would go out to the site, make sure that they meet all the criteria, and then I linked to several examples. City of Coral Gables in Florida had a really good site that I think model after. I mean, they have a lot of content and a whole directory of businesses that have these different levels. I think they have 4 tiers. Los Angeles, I don't think Pittsburgh has a program as well, but there weren't a lot of smaller townships that have a similar thing like this. Greater Philadelphia has a good program as well. And then, in terms of, stakeholder support or people we need to engage with, support from the supervisors, of course, the gathering circle, really the business association. Is there an appetite for this in businesses? Right? So a feasibility study would be done. Are we wasting our time doing this, or is there actually an appetite or an interest from the business community? And then really help identify a few businesses that we have relationships with to kind of help champion the idea, maybe do a pilot program with to see if there's any. And I think what's necessary, I don't have a lot of technical or operational knowledge when it comes to evaluating business for specific environmental, wastewater management, waste reduction, things like that. So is there a consultant or a firm or an individual that could volunteer to help kind of scope this out? And then I've provided really the different, the questionnaire, right? So what would the questionnaire actually look like? So sort of general, go through this, general solid waste reduction, energy conservation, water conservation, pollution prevention. I don't think we need to go through every single one, but I'll pause there. Any questions or comments on this?
Well, the guy from SAP believes he's more than a champion. He probably would say he's 90%. Whatever list you would come up with, he's way ahead of the curve. There are people in the community, I imagine larger corporations, who are prepared to sell you on the notion that they are greener than green.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. SAP would be the big logo.
I think it is the larger businesses who both are organized enough to address this and who really can address it. I mean, somebody who's selling shoes off a cart, I don't know what they can do to stop it.
Well, but
Other than stop smoking, maybe. I mean, what?
I'm thinking of a business that has closed, unfortunately, but that was Burlap and Bean. To me, they were a coffee shop down by
They were?
Azteca.
They closed them?
Yeah, they closed about
What
a year
happened?
ago. COVID happened.
Oh, and they never came back.
No, they have a location down in Media, but to me, they would probably meet because the products they sold were either their own coffee beans that they purchased from ethical coffee growers in South America, or they sold products by local small businesses, and they had no plastic. They had reusable coffee mugs, or you brought your own. So to me, someone like that, that's the opposite of SAP, but it's a small business that probably would qualify. I think this is great. I love it. I just think, the devil's in the details, and,
Sure.
and how would you verify? You'd really, I would not just rely on a survey. I would give people a survey, but then I would find out, find ways to make them prove, show us their composting program, make sure, have pop inspections where there's no plastic on the site or things
Yeah,
like that. That would be the hard part, I think.
I think the
Make sure
idea
that
would be to, figure out a way to get businesses to do it. That, like they want to do this, right? It's not us being businesses. So yeah, that's kind of the tricky part, I think.
Well, I think it's free PR.
Yeah, I think you have to look at that.
Well,
You
and-
can get
What is that?
It's free public relations if you.
Oh,
And there are more and more millennial consumers are really interested in this type of thing. And they want to patronize businesses that are doing the right thing. And I think if you give a business enough menu of options that can be flexible enough to suit different businesses, like a restaurant is going to have very different issues than like the running place, which, you know, so you'd have to think about like if you were the running place or a hair salon.
This is 24E, isn't it?
Is that what, I don't know what number is it?
It's entirely 24E.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
So what, is there a database of reports to list all of the businesses?
Up here somewhere.
Yeah.
But Dane, in researching this, and I think you've done a great job here, you and Bruce, in the Sustainable PA site, I believe they had resources about these different action items. Did they have like examples of programs? Is that where you got some of this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just Google searching. I think more research, kind of a second, like a little bit, going back the onion a little bit more, and actually talking to some other townships that maybe have something like this, caveats that they would recommend.
Well, my concerns are, you know, getting the expertise to do these audits. Clearly, we don't have it. Secondly, I'm not sure the EAC wants to be in the business of blessing whether you have it or not. I would opt for self-reporting and hope these people are honest about their, you know, their answers, and we could respond that way. The other thing is, I don't know how many businesses are in the township, but 7 of us. And, you know, can we cover the township if there's a lot of enthusiasm to do this? And I think we can do that with a survey. I don't think we can really commit now to being on, to going, you know, to each facility, except ideally, I liked your idea of picking 2 or 3 businesses as pilots for the program.
Right.
So we can shake things out.
You know, getting feedback from all the
Yeah.
town business
Yeah, that'd be great.
association. You know,
Yeah, they would. I mean, Paul would be
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think you could structure the survey or the application in such a way that you put part of the onus of fulfilling this and verifying it on the applicant. For example, if one of the criteria was that you use green energy, they could send you a screenshot or a PDF of their PICO bill or whatever that shows that they've opted for green energy. And if, for example, they don't hand out plastic bags or they require that you bring your own bag, they might have a sign in their window that says that. And they send us a sign of that, you know, or because I'm thinking when my community in New Jersey applied for the Sustainable Jersey program, we claimed that we did a certain action. And there was always a substantiation that we were required to send. So, you know, if you think about that when you're structuring your criteria and ask people to send you whatever documentation, that might help take the onus off of us and then also give some teeth to the program. And there are other things like, for example, there's the whole B Corp program, which is anybody familiar with that, B Corp? So if any of the companies in town are B Corp, well, then that shows right there that they've done a lot of those things. So you could ask them, are you a B Corp? You know, are you an Audubon bird town? You know, some organizations that have a little property might have already qualified for that. Penn State Master Watershed Stewards.
I found it's not too difficult to qualify for Audubon.
No, it's not.
$25 and I got my sign.
Yeah.
But it's a conscious behavior decision, you know what I mean? It's a decision of what you want to
Yeah.
prioritize in your.
That is a low bar. But like there's watershed friendly property certification. So if there are other certifications that you could ask about, that's one way of cross-promoting and then piggybacking on someone else's.
Yeah,
simple.
I think it's a great idea. I love it, and especially loving it being outside the windows, just like New York with the restaurants. You know, having that certification brings it awareness, which is awesome. I think it would be important to have, like you said, different levels for types of businesses, because you can't compare the resources of a Fortune, you know, SAP to a local bakery or things of that nature. There are some things within their control, if it's their building or if they're renting, would be different.
Right.
And that's a big thing as well. I think making them aware of it, making them want to do so, what are they doing to be greener? And again, you might be just changing one person's small behavior, but you're making a step forward, and that's so important. So I think it would be great for us just to do it. We're not going to be able to compare all the different companies on equal footing because there's so many different particulars, but I think it would be lovely if we could encourage.
And for example, like you said, stormwater management, yes, none of us are engineers and we can't begin to do that. But I'm thinking, like the church I attend has a green roof. If you ask them, what stormwater management practices do you send us a picture. They could send you a picture of the green roof. Or if they have a rain garden, like the Ellis Athletic Center has a rain garden, say we take a picture of this. Or if they have a downspout stormwater planter, take a picture of that. So, you know, there are ways I think you can ask for documentation.
And the idea is not to be so strict, I guess, about everything. Maybe choose 3 of 10 of the solid waste reduction items, and you qualify for one. It's not a one size fit all thing. So I think that makes sense.
And Paul would get you before his Newtown Square Business Association, let you do a Zoom presentation to the press. I mean, they'd be thrilled to death to see that. So definitely reach out to him.
Why don't we close with this? You and I will kind of work out some kinks, not kinks, but some details. And anybody here that wants to comment, send Dane an email, copy me, and we can move this along.
Good stuff.
But the key is, you know, the phrase greenwashing. Everybody would like to be engaged in greenwashing, which is, I'm greener than green.
Mhm.
Just don't, that's big.
Prove it.
Just put some,
And I agree with you, we can't be the ones to be providing a dining board or platform for people
Mhm.
engaged in greenwashing. But I think it's a good idea. So many people are tenants, so they really can't control property. They
Mhm.
just don't know, right?
Mhm.
yeah, there might be ways they can influence. Helps encourage them to sit down with their landlord.
And maybe if they're tenants, we can drill down to the owner of the complex and ask him what he's doing.
Yeah, they might be, I mean, there's a lot of businesses working remote now. This might be an incentive to get people back.
I forget his name, but the guy from SAP and I have been communicating a little bit. He's very enthusiastic about, I haven't discussed this, but he's very enthusiastic about sustainability in companies. And he'd be glad to share his knowledge with us in terms of what SAP is doing. Might be a good place to start.
Also, check with Janet Elliott, Newtown Square and Bloom. They just did, when the Newtown Square, the America and Bloom judges were there, SAP was one of the property that they looked at from an environmental standpoint, and they already kind of looked at what they're doing and best practices that they're following. She has all that information in her presentation she gave to America and Bloom.
Okay,
Thank you.
moving things along. Thanks a lot, Dane. I wanted to spend a little time with Sustainable Pennsylvania or Sustainable Newtown Square. I sent something out in about 4-point font, but I replicated in larger font for us to talk about. And what I thought we could do is go through the 18 kind of EAC-centric items on Sustainable Pennsylvania. I think there's 135 dealing with things like fiscal administration, community outreach, parks, walkability, but 18 fit clearly under the EAC umbrella. So I thought we'd talk about a couple of these things, see what we can do to achieve the points that are possible for each of the items. And as an example, we had, I'm looking for the business one.
We start with 12A.
12A?
Yeah, that starts the EOC stuff.
24 E's.
Okay.
All right.
And George could answer 12A.
Yeah, about the energy audit.
Yeah.
I mean, an energy audit was done a couple of years ago, so the question, right, exactly. So the question would be, you know, do we need to do another one?
Right, right.
But I mean, would an energy audit through all municipal buildings and operation, would that encompass your fleet? I don't know, but it looks to me that it they contemplate something broader than just the property.
I thought about that too. And in terms of the fleet, I think we could pluck some ideas from other people who've done the Ready for 100 study.
Yeah. And I know that, I think, Hopkins Township, for example, did a comprehensive study of every place they used energy. And both their physical plant and included their moving operation. But that's, you're right.
Yeah. I'm not going to ask you any questions, George, but can we get together later on to shake out this
Absolutely.
energy audit? 'Cause I
Well,
think-
Steve Neese had already started talking with the leadership team about this.
Oh, good.
So yeah, we can definitely get together and talk about that.
Great. I'm going from the beginning, which was establishing goals as a result. This is 12B. Establishing some goals based on the energy audit is something that would be, I think, longer term. We've got to get the data first and then make a decision about what realistic goals can be set in terms of making reductions in energy usage or migration to more sustainable fuels to accomplish what the township does. Let's see. These got cut off. Oh, 15A has to do with the acquisition, the purchases of energy and selecting renewable sources. I think we're part of the way there with a geothermal we have, but we're still buying electricity.
Correct.
And I don't know the source, but it'd be worth taking a look at to see if economically it makes sense for us to pursue one of these renewable providers, just like we've done in our homes.
George, do you happen to know what percentage of all municipal energy comes from the geothermal, or at least the energy for the buildings?
I can get that answer for you. I don't have it here, but I can get that answer for you.
Because that wouldn't exactly answer this, because they want all energy use, and that would include like
Vehicles and those
Yeah.
kind of things, yeah. Street lights, et cetera.
Has the township ever considered opting for that option through PICO where you can choose to use green energy?
So some of those options are available through the energy supplier that we have, which is Constellation, and I know that's actually an ongoing discussion. Because they do offer, you know, levels of you know, particular kind of clean energy that you can get credits for. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be eventually a presentation to the Board of Supervisors as well.
I'm going to move to the next page. I'm sorry about this font. This comes from a gigantic spreadsheet that's fairly impossible to print. Well, it sounds like 16A is MS4. I mean, it's, as I see it, right down the center of the MS4 plan and what we're going to do to make our goals. Cindy, I know that this is your kind of sweet spot. And in your opinion, do we have something, and what can we do if we don't have something in terms of a plan that would meet maybe EPA standards?
Well, it's the EPA. The MS4 plan, as I understand it, has not been approved yet.
I thought that it was just got approval, I thought.
News to me.
I think just.
Well, that would be, you can confirm that. Can someone share that
It
the
may
approved?
actually have gone on the website as a review period.
That
I can-
should,
I'll-
that
I can
should
confirm.
automatically come to the EAC. I'm just going to express disappointment here that this has happened before, where when the MS4 plan has come back, we've never been told. And I've just found out afterwards, oh, it's been posted on the website, the review period has begun, and yet it wasn't shared with us. That would be disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, if it turns out that we are correct in the assumption that it was already approved, I agree with everything that you're saying right there. And I think that kind of goes into what I've been trying to do before, is making sure that whether it's development plans or anything else that's inside the purview, the DAC's provided that documentation. So I'll take that. But I will confirm with Steve and let you know. I can send an email after I talk to Steve.
Well, that would be good. And that, I think, would only be a partial answer to this, because that has kind of a narrow corrective focus. And it's just requires approval at the state level by the DEP, whereas this requirement here talks about, it's broader. It's talking about the municipality's priorities for projects and the relative importance of adverse impacts on human health and water quality and the municipality's financial capability. The two things that strike me about this is that it's referencing an EPA document, and also within the last week, Bruce shared with me the Township Tredyffrin.
Yes.
The Tredyffrin townships, I'm not sure what they called it. So I guess it was their stormwater management plan, which to me was a broader document than MS4, because MS4 just focuses on how are you going, what corrective action are you going to take to reduce your pollution. But what I liked about the Tredyffrin plan was it was broader, and it looked at things like the township ordinances and how could the township ordinances or planning process or PRD, things like that, the code be restructured or adapted to help improve stormwater management on a more fundamental.
Flooding.
What?
Flooding. It looked at flooding as well.
Yeah, and it looked at flooding. So I would like to see us do something like that. To me, that would be more in line.
Leonard, can I forward you the Tredyffrin plan just to see what it looks like?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. I don't know if it's the same as their stormwater committee that they have, because I know that they have a stormwater committee that was made up of a bunch of residents, and I know that Cindy and I have spoken about it before. So yeah, send it over and
All right.
see where we can go with it.
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive plan, I thought. 16D has to do with water conservation, and what can we, as the EAC, do to promote the use of less water. And I think that's a tough one. You know, leaky faucets.
Low flow toilets,
Yeah,
things like that. Not washing off sidewalks with water, but sweeping instead. You know, this one and the one before about reducing energy use,
Mhm.
I wondered if it would satisfy the requirements to capture that in the sustainable business program that Dane was talking about. If you had, you know, water conservation as a category, energy conservation as a category, and if you were promoting this overall program to the businesses, I wonder if you could kind of kill three birds with one
Yeah,
stone there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Kind of loop in,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Next one, 17A. I hate to keep going back to you, Leonard and George, but I assume the state has an anti-idling law. Do we enforce that? If so, how do we enforce it? Is it a non-issue?
Yeah, that may actually be a police question. I do not have an
I
answer for
stumped the
that.
guys, okay.
Well, and it depends on what the law actually says. If it's for gasoline vehicles or diesel-powered vehicles. Okay, but we did this again at our community in New Jersey, and we took kind of a grassroots approach because we thought about where does most of the idling take place? Schools. People lining up outside the schools, the moms parked up for 15 or 20 minutes waiting for their kids. And also we had a train station, and it was, you know, spouses waiting to pick up their spouse on a cold day, and we actually walked up and down the parking lot and tapped on people's windows and gave them a little information about the idling, and it was not a very popular thing.
There's a few residents in the school district who do that with our buses. So I know that the school district enforces it pretty well. But you're exactly, I mean, that's exactly how it's from that with the school buses. Now, when it comes to the actual parents, I don't have an answer to that, but I know that the school district enforced it pretty well. But I think that in terms of the question for the township, you got us 2 in a row there. But I did just text to see whether the MS4 was adopted yet or not. So waiting
Well,
for
we
the
could
response.
ask the school district then to start doing something about that so that they can take ownership of it.
We do it we idle every morning. I just, as you said that, I was
Yeah.
like, wow.
What is the
Yeah.
law?
Every single morning too.
Yep.
And we sit there for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
probably.
So can we make a recommendation to the school district from the EAC, asking them to make parents aware and just become,
What can they do about it?
well, you know, when they're sending out information and they're just making people aware, if we give them the content, they can share it with all their families. Yeah.
Well,
If we don't start
actually,
with one
I don't
person.
think this is a police issue, though. I would think they've got more important things to do than pull up to,
Oh, I don't think it's a police issue. I'm just saying that if
I
we
think
have
it's
a-
education.
education awareness and a signage that just makes people aware.
Mhm.
The
Well,
Joe
I'm-
Pinto isn't going to do it anymore, so there you go.
But
Won.
out of, like, what would you do? Would you just turn off your engine and then move forward
Sure.
10 feet? or-
Well, no, because everybody lines up initially 20 minutes before they let the
And
kids
you
out.
just sit there
So you
without
just sit
moving?
there, everybody sits there idling away. And it didn't even occur to me until you just started talking about it. I was like, wow.
Back in my day, I walked 5 miles to school uphill both ways. That's how we fix it. We get kids walking again.
But then you have a day like today where it's already 85 degrees in the morning and you're not going to be able to get parents to turn off their engines.
Yeah.
No,
Kids
but
are still
that,
walking.
but that raises the bigger issue, and I'm sure there are some on here, like Safe Streets to Schools, and encouraging kids to walk more. And, you know, the walking school bus and walk to school week and walk to school day. I don't know that they have that here, but that was a big thing in New Jersey, is twice a year, there was a walk to school week. And there were mothers that were like they marched like little ducklings, the kids behind her, and she would walk them to school. And, you know, if you couldn't get people to do it every day of the year, it was at least an awareness raising effort that happened twice a year.
Well, what we really haven't done significantly is reach out to the school district. I tried, I didn't have much luck. But I think they'd be glad to hear our suggestions on what they could do on simple matters like this.
Right.
Walking to school, I think, is wonderful.
the other way is if you're not getting response at the district level, would it be possible to start at one school with one PTA or HSA, whatever they call them? And, word spreads, and these schools are competitive. And if the moms heard that Culbertson had this thing going on, if you kind of start as a pilot in one school, then it might spread.
Well, so all the Farmville Newtown schools send out a Sunday email every Sunday. And it's, little blips for each school, and then the attachment to the emails for us is for Culbertson. And I'm assuming for other schools would be for them as well. So, I mean, you could just easily say, like, hey, if you're sitting outside of the school building for 20 minutes, how about turning off your car?
Sure.
Reducing your emissions. Simple as that. And,
This comes out of the district, this?
It comes out. Is school? Okay. Yeah. But it usually has, I mean, it's, the email is general because it actually lists the high school, it actually lists, all of the elementary schools.
Oh, she might have changed it. Or you always come from.
They might, I mean, maybe because of COVID, because they've been doing a lot of, information.
Yeah.
Condense a lot of information.
And it looks like 17B, if you were to send out informational material, that the next one is the municipality supports public education regarding reducing air pollution. So something along, an educational message to the parents of the schools, handouts in the kids, I don't know if they put things in the kids' backpacks anymore, or, there's just ways of doing that, articles in the newsletter.
So you think you can find out who the person is that is behind this newsletter, this Sunday email? Uh, 17C, clean construction admissions. I don't know that we touched that at all. But, clearly it has benefit. I don't know how and where we'd fit in. But it's there, it's under our item, so
Well,
we should try to do something.
it's publicly subsidized projects. I don't know that we have any publicly subsidized. Do
Three.
Which one?
Well, in Philadelphia, I mean, if you were building in one of these tax advantage zones where you were getting real estate tax holidays for 20 years.
Mhm.
I don't know that there are any in this township. Maybe that's just not happening.
Well, would be-
I think that's the case.
What about Aqua and Pico? And they're technically considered, there are some publicly subsidized depending upon which avenue, but that would be something we could at least provide input for, correct?
Mhm.
They have to do their own guidelines.
We find out about their problem. We find out about Pico and Aqua projects like everyone else. It's a press release that gets pushed out from their central office. Because they're utilities under the PUC, they own the roads and they own the right of way. They come in and do what they want. And our ordinance in terms of the road work applies. But they just, I know I'm boiling it down to the frustration level, but they just put out a press release and that's all we can do. And again, that's consistent across the entire Commonwealth.
Do they have to follow the guidelines that are set up in the township by, let's say, if you had some type of green policies, would they have to follow them? Even though, is it something that they can carte blanche across the county, or would they follow each individual municipality's regulations if they were enforced?
I mean, they follow the PUC.
Right.
There are times, such as, for example, a road opening permit, that there's parameters that they're given, but I don't believe a road opening permit would give us the right to put restrictions on their equipment and all
Right.
that. I would have to look into it.
What
but I
about
don't
like
think so.
disturbing, like if there is, you're disturbing the grade, or you're disturbing the soil or the surrounding area, anything like that within the jurisdiction?
They can't work outside of the area that they own. So what they're disturbing, they own, the PUC gives them carte blanche.
Okay.
If there is a drop down area and they need a temporary construction, easement or a license, they get that from that property owner. And then that would trigger the review from the township. I did this all the time when I was at SEPTA, right? So if they stay within their property, within their right of way, the PUC gives them carte blanche.
So these guys don't budge.
No.
Maybe we'll give that task to Parks and Recs then.
Wait, now let me call Wade, he's gonna love you.
Squeeze for time, let me move down to 17E, which has to do with waste hauling. There's two kinds of waste hauling that occurs in our township, and one is the once every other week recycling, and then there's the private collection 1 or 2 times a week, depending upon the agreement you have. And Joe and I have looked at the implications of what if we consolidated into a single trash truck company, and what benefits, both economic and environmentally, would it bring to us? And I think we're going to present you present the details of that in our August meeting.
Actually, Leonard and I were just speaking, I spoke about the same thing before and asked him about that. You want to give the answer about being a class 2?
The second class township does not allow us, am I correct on that? Does not allow us to pick one single, doesn't have to go out, and that's why it's privatized.
So, I mean, we're responsible to facilitate recycling collection.
I thought you were out for trash.
Oh,
Okay,
and
because
for
there's 15
trash.
companies right now that come on my road. I counted them in the last few weeks, and there was like 15 between tech, trash, I mean, unbelievable. And they're passing by the same houses. So the discussion was, is there a way to consolidate? Years ago, it used to be you had, and this was like 30 years ago, I think it was Waste Management, and that was the only game in town, and then they opened it up, and it was kind of deregulated, if you will, but then it became so many different companies. So right now, we were trying to say, is there any way we can limit it, not in any way to try to interfere with business, or just to limit the number of vehicles that are causing congestion and traffic issues?
So I do not want to misspeak to the group. I would have to research the question.
Well, I was thinking about the township getting in the trash collection business, and I knew it would be an issue with second class township and perception that we're increasing taxes, although it would be a net savings, I believe, because of economics of scale. I think a trash company would be happy to have the township as opposed to having every 5th house in the township. And I was thinking that maybe the township could broker a deal and kind of get out of the equation. Talk to the various trash companies, maybe put out a request for proposal, and then pass it, resident, do you want to spend $300 for trash collection, or do you want to continue to pay $450? And no brainer to me that we should try to do something.
It's less impact on the roads too. But I think that George is the right, I mean, my understanding might be one thing, but I think the best thing to do is for George to circle back and just talk with Joe Kennedy.
Exactly, and I'll do that. Again, I just do not want to give bad information.
Right.
Sure.
and
I would
answer
only
on the
preface
fly.
it that it'd be really important that we provide an outside company to provide the service, and not necessarily try to take that on in-house, because we don't want to be picking up the benefits and the package of a pension and all the other things that the township and municipal code provides for employees. So if we did not use an outside party to do the collection, I would not want us to in any way, take that in-house ourselves.
Well, let's let Joe present in August, and let's beat him up the same way we beat up Dane. for his presentation. Just
No good
kidding.
deed goes unpunished. Did we really beat you up?
Oh, no.
Oh, good. I was gonna say, that was just.
I was thinking about 18 rooms.
A, policies, plans, ordinances protect wetlands, waterways, and their buffers. The best way, we do have those. I would be interested to know what's going on with the zoning rewrite. But I think we have those in place.
But they're they're pretty liberal, as I see it. I think it's 50 feet from a creek or something like that in terms of a buffer.
Yeah, here, you see the response, you only get 1 point. It doesn't give any qualification on the robustness of the ordinances or plans. It just says.
So we have them, but we'd like to see them improved a little bit.
Now, if you want to get down into more qualitative things, you could look at the next one, 18B, where you have policies and ordinances to conserve, sensitive places, environmental. And we do have steep slopes ordinance. I don't think we have anything on springs and vernal pools. I'd have to look at the ordinance again to see if it talks about mature woodlands or natural heritage. I know there are some ordinances. To what extent they meet all these.
I'm going to do this. I didn't realize we were over time. Janet was going to give us Cindy was going to talk about the Keystone Million Tree Initiative. You have the short spur. Do you want to?
I do, and it's time sensitive. So,
Okay.
The Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership is an initiative of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, which you would say, why does that involve? A lot of Pennsylvania, especially like Lancaster County, has an incredible impact on the Chesapeake Bay. And they are basically desperate to save the Chesapeake Bay. They are really getting more intense about trying to prevent the water pollution that runs into the bay, such that they are very aggressively trying to plant 10 million trees throughout Pennsylvania, all areas of the state, I think by 2025. And it's really quite an operation. They break the state into 5 zones or priority areas, one being the highest, and they get the most funding in trees. Our area, I think, is like 4A or 4B. So we're a much lower priority, but there still are allocations for resources for our area. And as a matter of fact, a couple months ago, I actually participated in a tree planting with the DelCo anglers out at the Edgemont, the housing development going in by the old Edgemont Country Club. And they had gotten like 200 free trees, free gloves, tree tubes, stakes, zip ties, socks, everything you could need to plant these little bitty trees, which will grow over time. I think this is something our township really should consider. We're trying to plant
Leslie,
like 1,000 trees. This would be different than the tree planting we've done, which is like $50 a tree, and it's 2 inches diameter breast height. These are much smaller trees. You're talking mass plantings, mass quantities, but it's the type of thing that the township could sign on as a partner and then place a large order for trees, because there are a wide variety of actually trees and shrubs, all native plants, all locally grown. They're trying to stimulate, the nursery industry in Pennsylvania by sourcing the trees from here. The minimum is either like 20 or 50 trees per species. So, that's how the nurseries provide them. But if we were to gather orders, for example, I've already talked to the leadership of my church, which had a lot of landscaping removed because of Claude DiPatone. And they are very interested in getting anywhere from 50 to 75 trees that they could replant along the perimeter. But for example, they don't want, only 3 species of trees. So what you could do is you could work with an organization like that, and the township could gather together the orders from the school district, houses of worship, neighborhoods, where you could go, let's say Ashley or Brookside or something like that, and say, okay, we want to plant 25 of these trees. We could do 25 on each street. You could target these neighborhoods that have had a lot of flooding, and give them out to homeowners. But make a plan now. The order would have to be placed by late June, and then the trees are picked up in the fall. George, you do have to drive out and pick them up. They don't bring them to you. So there is a bit of driving involved. But, I could see where this could really involve homeowners. You could do something like, give them out free to homeowners if they attend a workshop, if they attend a webinar. I think George and I have discussed this. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
I mean, I think it's a win. I love the idea of, getting neighborhoods together and again, getting all these various groups and entities together to be able to, get that order and then break everything up. I think it's a win, and I think it's doable.
Are these landscape plugs or the actual, like, what are the diameter?
They are about this big, and they are no thicker than my finger.
Right.
And, it's about this much root and about this much tree.
So by definition, that is a landscape plug, right? So we're talking 32 to 72, the flats, plugs for them?
No, they're in bundles of 25 and 50, or
Okay.
some species come in 35. But what you do is when you plant them, you dig a little hole, that goes very quickly. You stick it in the ground, then you have to surround it with a plastic tree tube. You have to pound a big oak stake in the ground, and you zip tie it shut. You put a sock over the top, and it takes years. I mean, I've attended research presentations from Stroud Water Research Center, and this is how they do their mass plantings when they're trying to establish a forested riparian buffer like an agricultural property. And there is some maintenance involved in terms of where you put the sock on the top so that birds don't go down and nest in it, and you put the plastic tube around it to prevent voles from eating it. But then invasive plants can grow up, so there is some maintenance involved of keeping the invasives away from getting into the tube.
It's very different than our bare root plantings that we do, where at the end of the day, you look at it and you see trees.
Right.
And
Here
they're
you
big.
see a tube.
Here you see tubes.
And you won't see any green out of the top for years.
Exactly. It's the long run. It's the
It is
long
the
game.
long run,
Mhm.
yeah. And if people don't want to do this in their front yard, I mean, this would be great for people who back up to a stream, like, Fox's Run coming out of Greer Park. If you're talking about those homeowners and wanting them to establish buffers along the streams, I think people would be a lot more amenable to having 10 of these tree tubes in their backyard and in their front.
Or I'll take 25 eastern pines.
It's June 7th,
What?
today.
Yes,
And they have to place an order by the end of the month?
yes.
How are you gonna do this?
Well, you
have to do it on the
you
con.
do it on faith. You
Mhm.
say, I think we can get rid of X hundred trees. And I've already started running some of the numbers, and George and I could say, okay, we think we can get rid of 400 trees.
You also have to mow around these things, by
You do. And yeah,
Yeah, but if you create an understory, like an eastern redbud, it's only 12 feet apart. It's only going to go up to 18 to 20 foot. You could fill up an understory of a forest area or the park, just in Greer alone. In the back area, you could stick 100, 150 red buds alone and not even put a dent in anything.
Well,
So
and
just
you-
as where you put things.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Harry, and that's one of the things they mentioned in the training is that when you plant these, you very much think about the mowing. And, you know, you figure out the distance apart to make sure it's mower friendly. And instead of doing in rows, which you could do in rows, sometimes they say you just, you know, curve them a bit to make it more aesthetic, but it's still very easy for maintenance. And in terms of planting them close, I was actually on a field trip to a school out in Westchester that on the school property, I think they planted like 500 trees. And they planted them really close. They planted them closer than we're used to doing, but, you know, that's just a different approach.
I think it's great. I think the township, I mean, you're not talking a lot of resources to buy a couple hundred of these trees.
It's
What is it, about like
free.
$1.50?
It's
Free.
It's free.
Oh, boom.
We just need to know that we can put them somewhere.
Yeah.
That's the,
Yeah.
that's the key.
I'll take 50.
I'll take a couple, I'll take a couple. With that, I'm going to close the meeting because we're over schedule here. Thanks everybody for coming. It's nice to see flesh again
Cool.
after all these months.